On Blues Radio International, we're continuing our antiviral worldwide tour with a visit in Sandy Hook, Kentucky with our dear friend, Rory Block. Rory, good afternoon.
Hey, how are you? How is everybody out there?
I
How are you
think
hanging out?
I think everybody's doing all right, and we're all staying together through this and helping each other through it. And I want to know how things are in Sandy Hook, Kentucky.
Well, it's really we're off the grid, and it's very beautiful. We have a lot of space to roam around in, and it just feels like not confined. It feels like we're not confined, and yet when we have to go out and go to the grocery store and all, then we have to take the precautions that we all have to take right now, and that part's very strange. And of course, there's a little edge of a major edge of worry and stuff, but we want to, absorb ourselves directly back into the music where there's joy and there's hope and there's a chance to escape and just forget about the troubles for a moment, because that's one of the beauties of music.
It connects us all, and connecting us all this way is so much more important now than it was even a few weeks ago. I can't imagine when I was sitting a few feet away from you right there about 7 weeks ago that we'd be where we are today. But at least we're following the guidelines. We are socially distanced by 1,000 miles. So we're doing everything the CDC says.
That's right. Just think about how it's going to be when everybody's allowed to hug again.
I think we'll appreciate it a lot more, don't you? I think we're going to see things and feel things and be aware of and appreciative of things that we never appreciated before.
I think it'll be a different world. I really do. But let's hope that there's greater awareness in the best of ways that we gain from this. And you've got to gain something positive. Otherwise, we haven't learned anything. I think that we will be a different world, but I think we can turn it into something really positive. I'm totally hoping that.
I'm counting on it. And the way we're going to do it is with the beautiful music that you're going to provide for us.
Okay. I worked for a long time on this beautiful little pedaling part. When I teach the song, I say, just pedal as long as you like. You don't have to worry. Nobody will think you can't remember the next verse. I said, Frankie was a good girl. Everybody knows. Look, she pedaled hard enough. Alice should close. He was a man, but it was doing her wrong. I said, if Frankie went down to the corner saloon, she didn't go to be gone long. No, she didn't keep humming her song. But every day on the songs, he was her man, but he was doing her wrong. I said, Frankie called you Albert. No, but Albert said, I don't care. Oh, if you don't come to the wrong, you're not gonna hold you out here. You was my man, but you're doing me wrong. I said, Frankie shot old Albert. Now she shot him 3-4 times. Said, go back, get the smoke of my gun and shield Albert dying. He was my man. Lord, but he done me wrong. Oh. Said, they ain't gonna tell no story. Lord ain't gonna tell no lies. Said, Albert passed about an hour ago. Girl, Alice cried. He was her man, but he was doing her wrong. I said, the judge and Frankie walked out on the stand. They walk out side by side. The judge said to Frankie, now you're gonna be justified for killing a man. I know he done you wrong. Oh. Poor Frank.
Beautiful. And this is a song that actually records a piece of history, doesn't it?
Yes, I like to tell people that there was a day. I like to remind people that there was a day and time when there weren't even televisions. You know, there not to mention no internet and no World Wide Web, but there were traveling musicians who would travel from town to town and state to state even with their instruments singing about the news of the day. And that's how people found out that there was this lady named Frankie Silvers. They heard about the singing blues artists and folk singers and country singers that just let everybody know what was going on. Stagger Lee, Frankie and Albert, you know, the Baltimore Fire. People were out there singing, and people would learn about the news that way.
Yeah, and that really goes back into Europe, a tradition of a long time ago that
That's right.
news was carried by people going from town to town singing it.
I'm sure that every country on earth, you know, every place there is, that's how people told stories, among other ways, was through music. Hi, Millie. We've got cats and dogs here. I'm sure they're
Okay.
going to make cameo appearances. Millie.
See if Millie will join you. Well, she will eventually, or one of the dogs will.
Well, Gibby's over there, and Millie's got a thing for giving Gibby a hard time. I don't know. We have other dogs, but she's focused on him, and he's a very sensitive little dog. So it's not as much fun for him. He shrinks whenever he sees her. She's my power cat.
Okay. Well, it's good to be surrounded by these beautiful beings. On your new CD, it features the Rory Block Band. Can you explain to us who the members of the Rory Block Band are and what instruments they play?
Here's one of the members. Here's another member. Here's another member. Well, somewhere along the line, I was thinking about this yesterday. It really came about through just having such a small amount of money to make a record. I mean, I would have just as soon gotten Stevie Wonder on every record, and Mark Egan, the fretless bass playing on every record, and Steve Kahn and Will Lee from the Saturday Night Live band that he was with them for years. I would have rather have those great people just every time I made a record. But hey, we were given such small budgets, and I was trying to get it done, and then it suddenly occurred to me that I could layer parts and do my best. So at first it started with me doing harmonies, a lot of harmonies, and that goes way back. I just felt like, well, I need them, and maybe we won't be able to go to LA like we did the other time and have Stevie Wonder's backup singers come into the studio. Maybe we can't do that this time. So what am I going to do? And I thought, well, let me see if I can do this. So I began layering my parts, and I liked the way my vocals sort of blended. There was a good blend there, and it didn't necessarily sound like it was one person singing. There was this feeling that it was just a group of voices. And so that was the first step. And then another thing happened where I started overdubbing guitar parts. So the way I do it now is I'll start with a basic track, and I'll lay that down. Let's get my slide. Where is it? Here. And I'll put a very basic guitar track on, and then I'll layer on another part in another tuning. So I've discovered that really works beautifully. It's like capo way up the neck, tune to a totally different tuning, and add a percussive country blues part, like inspired, say, by Tommy Johnson. Tommy Johnson had this wonderful strumming style, which I can show you in a minute. But so I noticed how well those things locked in together. So I would start with a simple part. Actually, let me back up and say it. I start with a homemade click track. What does that mean? I've been in the studio many times where the engineer generated a click track on the computer, and that's very commonly done. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. And we would sit there, and the engineer would say, "Is this the right tempo? Do you want faster than this?" And it was a little faster, so they'd speed it up. And by the time you're done, that's what all the people overdubbed to this, mechanically locked clicking part that told everybody exactly where they needed to play. So not wanting to have that sound of a computer, not that you can notice that all the time, but say I wanted to try something more organic. So what I did was I decided to start pulling out, like when you were here filming the video, more organic elements. And I started saying, I wonder what a hat box would sound like. Hold on a second, and I had all these wooden spoons and rubber spatulas and different sized boxes. I had a hat box. I had upside down cook pots. I had, oatmeal boxes, and I was trying to get an interesting sound. Pardon me. And what I ended up with, but I actually also did the guitar. I also did what I called guitar bongos. And then I thought, that gives a really organic feel to a track. If you can stripe a track with a rhythm that's totally organic, then that's going to be reflected in the mood of the track. So that started to really work. That started really working. And so after a while, the first thing I would do would be to make some kind of a rhythm track, listening to the song that I wanted to record for tempo. And sometimes I went faster than the original, sometimes a little slower. I didn't have to be totally locked into the original, but wanted to create the mood of it. So whatever tempo worked for me, I'd create that simple rhythm, and then I'd have that in the headphones, and I'd play the basic track nice and simple, and then I would begin layering. And then I sometimes would layer a third guitar part on, starting to sound really band-like and thicker. And then I didn't have a bass player, so I thought, well, what the heck? And I tuned my strings way low. I tuned them way low. I thought, this has got to be literally a bass part. And then I started, like with the Bessie Smith record, I listened to some fabulous bass tracks that her band were playing to some of her tracks. And so I tried to follow what they were doing. I was kind of learning about how the bass is played, playing the notes. And I tried to play with my right hand. I tried to play that little sort of thumpy percussion. I tried to duplicate the sound of a bass ultimately. And in the end, Rob was able to, he said, okay, let me work on this sound for a minute. And he was able to do this fabulous EQ. And I would come back in the room and I'm like, man, how did you do that? It's like a bass. So whatever he did something beautiful to it. So after that, I didn't even have to tune way down. I just did my parts and he would make them sound like a bass, So I would put the bass parts on. And then my favorite thing is putting the slide parts on. But see, when you play slide with a band, say like Bob Margolin, who you were talking to, I guess, yesterday, he's with his band and they're playing behind him and he's playing his slide parts on top. And that's such freedom. It's such a wonderful feeling of freedom. But and that's what I love, when it's my turn to play my slide parts, like there's a band behind me. And then I get to, But when I have a rhythm, this becomes a complexity for me later on, when I have to find a middle point between all the parts to come up with an arrangement for a live performance. So I complain a lot and I agonize over what should it be. And people say, can you play this from the new record? And I said, well, I'm working on the arrangement, So it creates a certain complexity. But on the other hand, the sound of it is in the end, it's very organic. I like using a computer in an organic way, because you can take a computer, sample somebody else's music, and then you play it back and it's like, oh, you could have played a keyboard and or you could have pressed a button and asked it to write you a song. That's the most extreme example of how a computer can take over. But what I like to do is end up with something that the computer just, you don't note it. You don't say like, well, oh, I guess that was done on Pro Tools. I don't want anybody to get that type of a feeling about it. And it's not looping and it's not the same thing again and again. So it's just a really fun thing. Then I get to sing, but I get to sing standing up. So the secret is I really love to do that. And that's what happened when you came to do our video, is you hadn't seen me do that before, because I'm always with the guitar. And don't get me wrong, I love singing with the guitar, and I've done it really all my life. But there's something so exhilarating about putting the guitar down and just getting up and singing, So that's what I get to do when I'm the Rory Block Band, and then I put the harmonies on last, So, I'm having fun. I would have to say that's super fun, that whole process. And in the end, I listen to it and I go, who is that? It's almost like it happened came drifting down from somewhere else, and all of a sudden there's actually a finished sound. It sounds like a band. And a lot of the reviews will say that. It says, you'll think that she's playing with a great band, but it's actually all her doing all the parts.
It's miraculous the way it comes together, and it does sound like a band. But a not insubstantial reason for that is that you have probably the best sound person in the business, Rob Davis, putting it together.
Yeah,
who by the way, is assisting us with sound today, although on Skype it won't come through. Imagine the most pristine, amazing sound you've ever heard, because that's what it really sounds like.
He's in the other room. I hope he's hearing this.
Okay.
Did
Well,
you hear all that, Rob?
No.
Okay. You just got complimented. You'll hear it later.
Okay. Okay.
Oh, it's being recorded?
It is.
How amazing is that?
Yes.
Technology.
Yeah. No, I do want to say about Rob is that working with somebody that you know, like, who is completely familiar with what you do, is that our working life is like absolutely locked. I mean, he knows exactly my process, and he's completely patient with me. Bless his heart, because I go on sometimes with details and wanting to do things a certain way, and he just doesn't question it. And he said to me once, he said, I've learned not to question you, because when you're done, it's great. He said, when you're doing it, I might not know what you have in mind. I'll give you an example. On the new record, the gospel song by Arizona Drains, she was singing in like a falsetto voice in a very beautiful way with her choir behind her and her piano. And I tried to sing it in a chest voice, and I'm like, this just isn't quite it. There's something is not right. And so then finally I said, she's kind of doing it, it's kind of like in a falsetto, but it's like the strongest falsetto I ever heard. So I said, let me just try this. So I went in and I did this falsetto verse and chorus, but it was high. It's like, you know not the day when the Lord shall turn your soul away. And it was like, is that really the way you're going to do the whole song, or are you going in the wrong direction? So Rob said, I don't know. Why are you doing that? And I said, wait, I have a plan. So I did the first verse and the first chorus like that. It seemed like it was going to remain like that. It had an attitude. It was good, but it wasn't full out gospel yet. So then what I did was I brought in chest voice on the last line of the chorus, so that there was octaves. All of a sudden there was a deeper voice singing in unison. That's a very interesting style that I noticed somewhere along the lines, a lot of times in soul music, where there's a high voice and an octave lower, there's a deep voice, but they're not singing harmonies, they're singing in unison. That's kind of got a special quality to it. So I popped in there. First I tried jumping onto head voice, from head voice to chest voice, with no transition, and it didn't work. So then I sang unison with the head voice, chest voice pops in, and you really don't notice it, just thickens it a little, and then the chest voice takes over, and that's what made it work. That was kind of like, there are all these little things that you learn, or that I have learned, that work for me anyway, that make a big difference. And so, like when I teach guitar, when I teach songwriting, I like to convey those little mysteries that I've discovered. Everybody's got their own. Bob's got his own, and Duke Robillard's got his whole, probably dictionary of techniques that he can help other people with. But those are the little things that I find as I go along that just make a way out of no way. It's suddenly not working, and then it suddenly is working because of that little idea, that little twist that just put the right spark into it, and then it worked.
Wow. Well, that's quite a process, and thank you for taking us inside it.
Yeah.
Can you play another song for us?
Okay. Since as I explained, I'm probably not going to put together the perfect version. I've got all the basic tracks. That's the thing. I've got the basic tracks for the new record, no problem there. But then somebody would have to come up to me, Rob, and plop the slide on my finger mid-song, because you can't do all the notes in regular tuning And when your slide is in an open tuning, and I played all, most of the layered tracks in regular tuning, and then somebody has to come over and go without interrupting the song for you to do the solo and then take the slide away.
That would be a good visual.
Yeah, we've actually done it. We've actually done it before. Okay, good.
What's interesting, among other things, when I watch you play, Rory, is that we talked about percussion a minute or two ago. You've got 3 levels of percussion going on when you're playing solo guitar. You've got your foot, you've got what's going on with the right hand, and your slide knocks the neck. So
yeah.
There's a lot of percussion even when you play solo without the additional instruments.
Yes, there is. I'm going to give an example of that with a slide.
Okay.
And the reason I use this socket wrench is because John Hammond told me about how they come in every size, because for years my smaller hand could not fit a regular wine bottle broken off, which is what Stephen Grossman and John Fahey and John Hammond, and they would just break a wine bottle, and I looked and searched and gave up because nothing, was going to fit on any of my fingers. So in the end, John said, well, go out and get yourself a socket wrench because they come in all sizes. So I looked around at a gas station that owned by a friend of mine and came up with this, where I would use it on the end of this finger. And I explained to people that slide is a Zen thing, like a tennis backhand, and you can cover your entire finger, and you choose, it's like, here are your choices. And so you can bend at the knuckle, you can cover the whole finger, or you can do like Fred McDowell did when I met him, which is have a little tiny piece of metal on the end of one knuckle. I mean, you can do it your way, whatever feels right for you. So this is what feels right for me with a 14 millimeter, I think, deep well socket. And then you have to sand off the end. So they had a machine shop at the gas station, and they made this just right for me, and I was thrilled and excited. And I tried to start learning how to do slide. That's a whole other story, which I can tell you about too. But here's one of the things you can do with your slide. You can use it to hit the neck like that. So you. That's what Robert Johnson did. He used his slide as like a drum. So I teach people about that. You can actually swing over the top of your guitar, come down on the neck, give it a few little chips and dents and stuff while you're at it. But, for all the denting and smashing I've done, this guitar has held up exceptionally well. I don't see any actual deep grooves or anything on the edge of it.
That's surprising. It's a very special guitar. Yeah. Can you tell us about it? Before you play?
This is my signature. Yeah, for years, Stephen Grossman and I had crossed, the country and hitchhiking in 1964, and he just kept on picking up all these beautiful old Martin guitars from pawn shops and just saying, got any old guitars? And they would bring out these old Martins, and they would go dusting it off. And he would say, what do you want for that old guitar? And they would say, he would emphasize the word old, so they would get the idea that it wasn't worth anything. And they would bring out something that needed a neck reset, an old herringbone, Martin, etc. And by the end of the trip, he would get these for $40 or $50 each. They were giving them away. And when we got to the West Coast, they were worth more. I just saw the zeros being added to the value over time. And in not very long a time, they were worth more. And he had herringbone inlaid, beautiful, pearl around the edges. You name it, he had a bunch of them. And so I always longed for one of those. And I always had no guitar for years. And John Sebastian would lend me a guitar to make High Heel Blues. And he would say, here. And we'd go into his collection of guitars. And he would say, pick out whatever you want. So I would, and make a record. And then I would but I don't have a guitar. I had a nylon string, you see, because my parents gave me a nylon string, a Stella guitar. This really links into Bonnie Raitt because she got a Stella guitar also when she was 8. So, this is a very weird, it's that's very strange. So here I was with my nylon string guitar trying to play these country blues songs, and it wasn't compatible with it. There was just something about bending and snapping that wasn't as good on for what I wanted to do. on the nylon, and so I switched to silk and steel, and that was partly it, but then I had to have steel strings. One day, years on into my career, I mean, some other guitar companies gave me their instruments. I was very lucky, got some nice instruments along the way, and just people giving them to me, guitar builders, so I had a pretty nice collection. But one day, Martin Guitars called me up. They read what I said about their strings in an interview. Nobody told me what to say. I didn't know. I was just telling it like it is. These are the best strings I've ever used. I use Martin mediums. And they asked me if I'd like to talk about it. Okay, there goes Gibby. Let's see if someone's coming up the road. Rob, if you need to let the dogs out, feel free. We'll let the dogs out. There we are. Every little squirrel that crosses the road, they're very concerned.
Yeah, well, that's
they
your.
called me up and they asked me if I would like to talk a little bit about their strings, because they'd seen in an interview in writing me talking about their strings. And one thing, of course, I wanted to do, and one thing led to another. And before I knew it, Dick Bowe called me up and he said that they wanted to do a signature model guitar for me. And that was like, there have been landmarks in my life where I felt like, if I don't live another day, it's not that I'm being fatalistic, but if I don't even live another day, I'm good with this. I'm good with this lifetime. This is more than I ever expected. You know, maybe I died and went to heaven or something. I'm going to be able to have a signature model guitar. So Rob and Dick Bowe and I went to a nice restaurant somewhere down near the factory there in Nazareth, Pennsylvania. And I forgot to eat because we just had napkins and we were drawing ideas. And Dick is a great artist. I mean, he's got books out with his beautiful creations and his guitars that he's built. I mean, spectacular looking instruments, and he designs them meticulously. He's a great artist. And we drew out, like, we came up with the idea, let's make the neck a highway. That might have been my idea. I don't know, Dick, if you're out there hearing this, and it was you, correct me, please. But I thought that I said, why don't we make the neck a blacktop highway? I said, it's such a bluesy theme. And then the more we got talking, we came up with the railroad crossing here for the crossroads. I went down to the crossroad. That's what that little railroad crossing was there. And then we put on, Dick came up with this, well, we'll put a railroad crossing sign and a stop sign, and here's our lights over here, and here's a yield sign. And Dick came up with this, which is a rendering of a terraplane. We thought maybe we would put a terraplane car on it with our, the Robert Johnson theme. And then all the signature model guitars get the artist signature and mother of pearl, and signed by, the grandson of the founder of Martin Guitars, C.F. Martin. And then they went off to make it, and then I got the call that, I was just walking on air. Here was this person who had no guitar, and now I'm going to have, like, the world's most spectacular guitar. So I think we went to a trade show, probably, I think it might have even been in Memphis. And there was my guitar being displayed at the Martin booth, just a feeling that gave me so much joy and still gives me so much joy. And over time, I got 3 of the prototypes. I got the prototype 1, 3, and 4, or something like that. And then I had also been given, prior to the signature model, I had been given, here's our guitars on the wall. Pick the one you want. I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, I never take anything for granted. I never do. I'm always shocked. Yeah, so first they said, so that was my road warrior. And this is, of course, not that guitar, but I still have it. I love it. It's one of the best guitars I own. It's right up there with the Sig guitars. And I used that for some time before they gave me the signature model. So, I mean, I feel like a very lucky person.
Well, it's a level of prominence that you certainly well earned, and we're really blessed to have you share all of this with us. What feels like the right thing to play now?
Maybe we should do, because I talked about Tommy Johnson's strumming styles, because now we're talking about the things that inspired me even today with the stuff I write, the way I layer music, the way I operate the Rory Block Band. Every part of that is based on the things that I learned from all the country blues that I've played all these years. So let me see if I can. do a little bit of Tommy Johnson. Talk about the strumming. And this is very funny when you write it out in tablature, because there's all these arrows going in every different direction. You know, it's partial strum, up, down, 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 up, down, down, up, you know. Gets a little crazy to explain it, but after a while, just like, you know, ice skating, bicycle riding, anything where coordination is involved, and once your body memorizes something complicated like how to balance, how to do a twirl if you're a dancer, you know, how to not fall over on your bicycle. When you learn that, that's really what it's all about. So once you get this strumming, then people say, well, how do you connect? Then they learn something note for note, like down, up, the strumming, bass, down, up, let's say. And I said, but how do you then go to the next chord? And that's a really great question that everybody who's learning to play goes, okay, I learned this part, but what about this part? How do you connect them? Like, is there a moment of silence and then go to the next chord?
Yeah.
And I always say, like, it's just something your hand learns when you're doing it on, you know, when you're practicing, when you're in a quiet space, all of a sudden, you don't have to think about it. But to teach somebody how to move from one chord to another may not be possible. You know, it might not be possible. If you're doing these strumming styles and these technical styles where there's a lot of different parts, there's a certain amount of intuition where your hand has to get the knowledge. And once your hand figures it out, you're unstoppable. But you have to get there sometimes on your own. So Tommy Johnson did this beautiful. So that's why I say bass up, down, up, 3 ups, you know, that whole pattern where you actually have to know that sometimes you're going to go down, up, and down, and there's a pattern to it. Now, this is a song that I did on stage with Bonnie Raitt in Holland once, and then again in Albany, New York, with years in between, just where she called me up on stage when she was doing one of her fabulous, spectacular, incomparable shows that she does, where it's life-changing to watch her perform. And we both learned country blues while we were growing up, and we both had country blues as an inspiration. We both knew some of the rediscovered blues people. She knew Sippy Wallace, I did not. We both knew Son House. So, you know, there's this amazing, there's some kind of a parallel universe thing that Bonnie and I have done. With Bonnie, I say she's the queen. And she's just done her thing so beautifully with artistic integrity all the time. She's a real inspiration in that sense. I went through some rough times where record companies kind of pushed me around, not around her, but before that, some big labels saying, this is the way you have to do it, and you do it our way. And she never let that happen to her. I'm like, how did you do it, Bonnie? You know, how did you tell them no? And I don't know how she did, but she did perfect job so that she was always front and center as herself. I did a couple records where I got lost in the sauce, and it didn't matter who would have done the parts that they asked me to do. It was their production, and I was like an afterthought. But once I got to Rounder Records, I didn't let that happen anymore. I thought, I'll never let that happen anymore. And that's when I started doing country blues again. And they said, don't worry about radio friendly, just make us a record that you think is beautiful. So I would have done Big Road Blues by Tommy Johnson. By the way, are you there? The screen is blank.
Yes, I'm just trying to let everyone concentrate on you right now.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So I disappear every once in a while, but I'm absolutely here.
Okay.
I want to not have my image get in the way of people appreciating and enjoying every moment of you.
Whatever I just want to make sure we weren't disconnected.
Oh, I'm still here.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm going to do Big Road Blues by Tommy Johnson. And I'm going to dedicate it to Bonnie. We're 2 days apart, same year. So I always know whatever landmark I've reached of Bonnie's out there as an inspiration, handling it probably as beautifully as she does. All right. Big Road by Tommy Johnson. why don't you, Lord, get somebody else? You take a hold out money, but sugar won't take mine. Sugar won't take, I mean mine. Now you take a hold out money, but sugar won't take mine. I say you take a hold out money, but sugar's got won't take mine. I said that the sun gonna shine in my back door someday. My back door sun, I mean day down. Sun gonna shine in my back door someday. I said the wind go blow my way. Well, now, what makes you do me, Lord? Daddy like you do, daddy like you do, no. What makes you do me, Lord? Daddy like you do. I said you made me think of going to some that girl. You know there's a ain't gone down no dark road by myself. Now don't you hear me talking to your daddy, son? Ain't gone down no dark road by myself. I said if I don't get you, Lord, get somebody else.
What a timeless song. So many people have played it, and it's great to hear you play it.
I think I live in a bubble because I just, I learned it in the 1960s, and I only was surprised that Bonnie also played it. That's it. I didn't like everybody's done this song. When I went to make a tribute, a Robert Johnson tribute, and or maybe I recorded Statesboro Blues, and Rounder Records at the time said, but everybody else has recorded that. Are you sure you want to do that? And I thought, well, I'm not aware of every other cover. I'm sure there's a lot of good ones. I'm just going to do it the way I heard it, and that's what I feel like doing.
You bring something very special and unique to that. As I travel from this very isolated spot where I am to the isolated spots where everyone else in the world is, and I listen to this music, including music that I've heard before, it now sounds different in many ways. The words have different meanings than they did before this all began. And the songs about relationships obviously are different when we're in this period of isolation. Songs about being together with people are different. And some of the meaning of the lyrics seems to have changed. Has the music changed for you at all through this experience?
Well, interestingly enough, I've had, a complete break from the time that this started, which is when you came here to do the video, which was, I think, February 6th, and today, and on now that April-May shows have canceled, now I've got a break until June. So I'm right here in isolation, and I'm not actually thinking about has the music changed, but that's very astute, because it's almost, I almost feel the sense of sorrow, like for a more innocent time, when we didn't have so many cares, and we didn't have so many thoughts and so many worries. I mean, you and I can remember in the 1950s, right, when we were little people growing up, and we knew that there was get under your desk and cover your head, and there were these, air raids and stuff. We knew about those, and they were scary to me. But then sort of those drifted away, and it became like everything was safe all the time, other than like looking out for traffic when you cross the street in New York City when you were, 12 years old. It was like I could walk anywhere. I could walk anywhere in the city by myself, no problem. We knew our neighbors. We knew people for blocks around throughout the entire Greenwich Village. Felt like a neighborhood, safe. And, we can't feel that innocent feeling of safety like that necessarily now. So I kind of grieve for that sweetness of that lost time. And, the thing where you can see your friends and you can hug them and you can gather together. And we just need to get something back at the end of this that reminds us of that feeling of safety. Because if that doesn't return, I think I would really, really grieve about that. But we're going to stay positive, like you said, that you know what? Here, let me throw this at you. What the devil meant for evil, God will use for good. There's got to be something at the other side, some lessons, something of value. But right now I feel sad. I think I just want to say I feel sad, and for some kind of freedom lost in a way, But let's see how we feel in a few months if things really improve.
I'll tell you what, a lot of the things we take for granted, I take for granted being able to be in the same place as you, that we can greet each other with a hug.
Oh, yeah.
And that was just normal interaction. I'll tell you what, I'll be looking forward to the next time that happens. And when it does, I'm going to relish every moment of it. And I hope we all can do that with our daily interactions. The people we walk by and don't notice, the people we casually say hello to, the people we say, how are you doing, without really caring what the answer is.
Right.
I'm sure hoping that's going to change. And I think it will when we first get out there. The real challenge will be to maintain that, because I think it could be a very beautiful thing for us to come out of this with, if we can only keep a focus on that.
That's a great piece of wisdom right there. And I think that it's the lesson that we learn when somebody that we don't even know dies. And we go, oh, it's not the same. The world is a different place. If only they were still here, like I think of Princess Diana's death and how the whole world went into shock. But when someone's here, sometimes we get used to them. And we don't think, every day I need to celebrate everybody that I love and everybody that I know and care about. I have to thank people. I have to go out of my way to say thank you so much. There's so many gifts that we get all the time. And you're right. Like we forget how incredibly lucky, or you could say blessed, or that we really are, and are we valuing it? So that's a whole other immense lesson to be learned, is value it more, value every moment. I mean, I'm so glad that you're in the world. Let me put it that way. I'm so glad that this other friend is in the world. I don't know how many people have had this experience where they're going to look for a family member that they didn't know they had. Now they have these great TV shows like Ancestry.com, and you see people linking up with siblings that grew up without them for their whole life. They didn't even know they had them, and they were located. And what that means to us when we find people that we didn't know that we had. And so this whole thing is like, value what you have when you have it, because when it disappears suddenly, and I'm speaking from my experience, you say, if only I could see them again, if only I could tell them, if only I could see their face one more time. It's so intense. So maybe when we get back together on the other side of this, we'll be celebrating that, and maybe we can keep that with us all the time, like you said, not passing somebody in a superficial greeting, but actually wanting to know something about that person and valuing them and saying, every time I passed you on the beach, in your case, you're walking on the beach a lot, you probably pass a lot of interesting people. And maybe this time will be next, when we get back to normal or whatever we get back to, you'll probably find out a lot more. My mom told me that when her, wasn't my dad, but her husband, who was her second husband, when he died, she said she connected with all these people that she never would have connected with in this spontaneous way. And it was always she was in a laundromat, and a conversation would come up, And it suddenly would turn out that this person next to her that she would probably never have talked to under any other circumstances, but something erupted in her where she wanted to start talking to him. And then he started talking, and they both just lost their spouses. So these things happen, and you suddenly find this deeper level of communication if you reach out for it, is what I'm saying, if you reach out for it. And I'm going to add to that one of the huge blessings being in this field of music that I'm in is that the fans who come to see you every night are those types of beautiful people. I mean, I can never say enough about the beauty of the people who love music and come out to support the artist. It is beyond any expectation that I ever had. People want to say, thank you for writing Love and Whiskey. My dad died of alcoholism, and that song saved my life. And I'm like, oh. And the vulnerability and the beauty of people wanting to share their story, it's so enriching. I don't even know if I never expected it. I don't know if I even deserve all of that beauty that people give. They just, and suddenly go, I have faith in humanity. I watched the news and I lost faith in humanity. I met people face to face and I gained back all my faith in humanity and then some.
I think that's a beautiful thought and something that we need to carry with us and remember. And can I trouble you for one last song before we go?
Let me do that. So here's an example of a song that I wrote. Initially had no words. I did it as an instrumental. Then I wrote some words that were kind of fluffy, and I think I was coming along as a songwriter, and I hadn't yet learned to dig deep. I thought, well, that'd sound right, and what, is that like what I would hear on the radio? And I was searching as a songwriter. And then somebody heard the song that I had recorded with these sort of fluffier, more superficial, perhaps, words, and he just said something really subtle, but it hit me like with a boom. He said, are those the words that you're going to use? And he wasn't being polite, he was being polite, but the message was like, can't you do better than that? And I could have, if he had said that, I would have been so devastated, but he sort of left me with this little gentle nudge that maybe I could do something better than that. And I went back and I thought, what can I do? And I reached around for this letter that I had written, this real person, when we parted, and he had an alcohol problem, and it broke up the relationship. And ultimately I looked at it and I said, I wonder what this would sound to that music. It was like a whole change of mind. And I went and I looked at the words, I listened to the music without my other vocal. And I thought I could push this around a little bit to make it match the rhythm, which is, to me, songwriting is all about that now. It's like, push it around a little bit to make it match your rhythm. Say what you need to say, but maybe hone it down, because less is more. That's what I want to say. Less is more. And I learned a big lesson in songwriting words. Don't just reach for something that you think rhymes. Who cares about rhyming? Tell the story. Who cares about format? Tell the story. So that's what happened with this song. And immediately, I thought I wouldn't put it on the record because I thought this is just too much, too personal, too weird. No one will relate to it. Put it on anyway because a friend said, you have to put that on your record. It was the very last song. Everything was finished. And then I had this and I just went back and did it. And she said, you have to put that on your record. I did the vocal one time. Take one.
Wow.
Because I thought, well, I won't use it anyway. And all of a sudden it was a single.
It turned out to be quite a big song for you at the end of the day.
Yeah. All of a sudden they said it was released as a single in Europe. I'm like, a single? I've never had a single. Wow. All these landmarks in my life. Stevie Wonder playing on my record, somebody releasing a single, and then getting a fax with a little hand-drawn champagne glass falling to the side with bubbles and olives everywhere, and it said, congratulations, you have a gold record. I'm like, man, this is beyond any dream that I ever had. So it's been famous for years, and more people say, thank you for writing it because they get it. I thought no one would get it. Well, write your story, write your book, write your story down. Your story's important. People will get it. Write your songs. People will get it. Well, if you live in dusty twilight, baby, that's okay. 'Cause there are women at the bar to greet you every day. And you can take them back to life with you and visit Jamie's room. But they can never take the pain away or brighten all gloom. And if your hands are clenched in sorrow, may it help you ease your pain. And all the windows have a view on city rain. City rain. Well, if you walk in constant sorrow and you cry for me, if you're hit with painful memories, maybe then you'll see that if you drown yourself in liquor because it keeps you company, just remember who you lose it and be proud to set me free. Because you don't talk back, don't disagree, said it just makes you see so hazily. But in the morning light scatter with the wind, scatter with the wind. Well, they tell you on the telephone to let him go. Said they tell you he's a sinking ship and he's trying to pull you down. Don't you know? But every time you call me up, say you want me back, you know you break my heart. Said you want me to come back home and try, and you want me to make a brand new start. Well, if wisdom says to let him go home, then you know it's hell, because you just don't know until you've tried to love a man who's loving whiskey, loving whiskey. My baby left me for the bar and the lure of the nightlife. Good times and crazy women and another glass of Tanqueray. When if wisdom says to let him go home, then you know it's hell, because you just don't know until you've tried to love a man who's loving whiskey. Loving whiskey.
It's one of the most beautiful and moving pieces of music I've ever heard, and it affects me that way every time I hear you sing it.
Thank you.
You know,
it takes me to another place too.
I'm sure. Is it painful?
Yeah. That's always what I think every songwriter would agree. I mean, you go there when you sing the song. I mean, you're there when the day you wrote it, you know.
Yeah. Well, absolutely beautiful. And I was thinking as I'm listening to you sing, Rory, and getting to watch you, even though we're quite distant at this point, that on the news we hear about the lack of medical supplies, the inability to deliver medical supplies. And you just delivered a lot of musical healing to a lot of people. And you cut through all those supply chain problems and manufacturing problems and brought it directly to people's hearts. And I can't thank you enough for that gift.
Well, I'm on a mission, and I've thought this many times. I'm on a mission to do the music, and if I ever can't do the music, I'll be sad. But I feel like I was put here for a reason, and one of the biggest reasons is to play music, just in case it helps somebody else. I mean, honestly, that's it. Whether it's preserving old country blues, that's a mission, but it's all about the music and what it might be able to do for someone else.
Well, you've done a lot for us today.
Thank you.
Thank you for spending the time with us. I love you, and I can't wait till we can see each other in person again. But let's try to do this again.
We'll make the next video. Let's do this again, and let's make another video as soon as possible.
We will do so. I love you. Take care.
Love you too. Bye.
Bye.